Movie franchises have become a juggernaut of our pop culture, particularly in the past 2 decades. And many of the most popular franchises, of course, focus on various sci-fi stories, one of the most notable entries being the Terminator franchise, with the first two films being both revolutionary for their time and becoming all-time cinema classics of the sci-fi action genre. Since the release of Terminator 2 Judgment Day in 1991, the franchise has been on a very rocky road, with multiple reboots and failed attempts at starting a new trilogy of films, with the most recent attempt being 2019's Terminator Dark Fate. And with another reboot of the franchise officially on the way, it seems like the perfect time to look back at the previous attempt and see if the reboot could learn from it. Greetings, all you movie junkies and entertainment lovers, and welcome to another review. Today we're going to be talking about Terminator Dark Fate. The film starts in 1998. 3 years after destroying Cyberdyne, Sarah and John are suddenly ambushed by a T-800 Terminator, which kills John despite Sarah's attempts to stop it. Then jumping to 2020, a new advanced Terminator known as the Rev-9 is sent back in time to Mexico City to murder a new savior, Danny Ramos, while a cybernetically enhanced super soldier, Grace, is sent from 2042 to protect her. Sound familiar? The Rev-9 infiltrates the automobile assembly plant where Danny and her brother work, but is stopped by Grace, who escapes with the two siblings. The Rev-9, using its abilities to split into the cybernetic endoskeleton and shape-shifting liquid metal exterior, continues to pursue them. However, Sarah Connor arrives in time to temporarily disable both forms of the entity. Danny, Grace, and Sarah then retreat to a motel, and Sarah reveals that she found them because in the years since John's death, she has been receiving mysterious encrypted messages detailing the locations of other arriving Terminators, allowing her to destroy them before they become threats. Grace notes that Skynet and John do not exist in her future, and that humanity is now threatened by another AI called Legion. The new AI created a global network of machines to terminate the human saviors, who organized a resistance movement to counter Legion. Sound familiar? And Danny's destiny is linked to their war against it, essentially making her the new John Connor, and Legion the new Skynet. Along the way, they meet the old T-800 that murdered John. It also turns out that he is the one that has been sending Sarah the encrypted messages, who, as it turns out, has carved out a new life of their own and agrees to help them. First of all, let's talk about the opening scene. I know a lot of fans hate it, and at first I tried to accept it, but my mind just could never move past it. And that seems to be where I think a lot of people are split on this particular movie. I think it heavily depends on how accepting of it you are, and for me, the more I think about it, the more I've just grown to hate it. Now at this point is unfortunately where the whole timeline gets completely screwed up, and we find out that Skynet apparently sent back multiple Terminators to kill John. Now if that's the case, couldn't they just send them all at the same time? Or why wouldn't they just send another T-1000 instead of a T-800? I mean, it is supposed to be the latest and more efficient model, at least in the original timeline. Honestly, this to me feels no different to how they killed Newton Hicks in the beginning of Alien 3. It just makes it feel like the events of T2 or even T1 no longer matter. I mean, if you're gonna try and do a soft reboot of a franchise, the last thing you want to do is dismiss the two most popular and beloved entries, which to me kind of feels like what they did here. But this is just where things only start to no longer make sense. Now that John is dead, he can't grow old, become the leader of the Resistance, and send Kyle Reese back to 1984, nor the T-800 back to protect himself. So now Skynet is apparently become Legion, there's now another leader, and the T-800 has grown old, becoming more human, and somehow still exists? This movie's called Terminator Dark Fate, but really it should have been called Terminator Paradox. The rest of the movie is fairly decent. I liked the Rev-9, it felt like a good mix between the T-800 and the T-1000. Grace, the human hybrid character, was fine, other than the part where she cuts a fly in half, and the scene in the drugstore, which felt very unnecessary to me. Linda Hamilton coming back gives a really solid performance here, as does Arnold, who has a lot of good material to work with, other than the texting thing, which didn't make much sense to me. And of course there's Danny, the new future leader of the Resistance, which begs the question, if you're still gonna have that whole storyline, why can't it still be John Connor? The beginning of the new characters up to when Sarah shows up was fine enough. As the movie went on though, it got quite bloated. The plane sequence, the water sequence, the end fight at times felt static to me. Then they try to do an emotional ending, but it just ends up feeling like the T2 ending all over again. And then they leave it with the future war still coming. And this was supposed to set up a trilogy just like the last 3 movies, which of course, as we know, isn't happening anymore. And just this past year, James Cameron announced that there's going to be yet another Terminator reboot, which yet again will probably set up for a new trilogy just to be cancelled, and the cycle will continue again and again and again. At this point, I'm just tired of the franchise. It feels like we're going round in circles, never going anywhere, the same story over and over. And in cases like this, all of their attempts to try to change it to make it something new, it ultimately just ends up repeating all the same cliches and stories from the previous movies. I mean, why not actually do something different? Why not make Danny the new version of Miles Dyson instead? Wouldn't that make for a more interesting story? And if you can't or won't have John Connor, just have a quick line where Sarah says that he's in a bunker underground somewhere because he's too important or something. Surely that would be a lot easier than just having to rewrite timelines and dismissing events from previous films. It's a shame because I had such high hopes for Dark Fate myself, especially with not just Arnold coming back, but Linda Hamilton coming back as Sarah Connor, and even having James Cameron involved in some way as well. Ultimately, for me, this just ended up being another disappointing sequel. And as for the upcoming reboot, I'm always that person that's hopeful about reboots of classic franchises, as all it takes is for someone to come in with a fresh new take on the same concept and make something new from something old. Even I have my doubts on another Terminator at this point. But regardless, I hope whatever the new reboot ends up being is something new and original, but something that reminds us of why the first 2 films were so great in the first place. Considering the track record that the franchise has had up till now, it's probably unlikely, but you never know. Maybe this time we will get lucky. So until then, as far as I'm concerned, the timeline still ends at Judgment Day. Thanks for watching this review. Be sure to subscribe for more videos, and until next time, be sure to consume as much entertainment as humanly possible, and I will see you in the next video.